2017. Can I get a roll call?
Stein. Here. Hanson.
Here.
Dolly.
Here.
Colhane.
Here.
Hayes.
Here.
And Olson and Stonebarger are absent.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Is there any changes to the agenda? Or can we get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion by Colhane, second by Stein. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Second item on the agenda is the ordinance amendment to section 21.8026 and 21.8028. If you want to walk us through that, Brandy.
Yep, I'll give the background here. So on September 5th, the City Council considered ordinance number 1733 to amend Chapter 2180 and 2190 of the revised ordinances of the City of Watertown to update the sign code. This being the time scheduled for a public hearing on ordinance number 1733, the mayor called for public comment. The public made comments both in favor and against the ordinance. Motion by Danforth and seconded by Vilhauer to approve ordinance 1733 as presented, and the motion carried. Subsequently, city staff received a request to further amend the sign code to allow realtor signs within the city right-of-ways. City staff also recognized a need to amend the sign code to recognize identification signage. Currently, all signage for large buildings is counted towards the total allowable signage for the property. The proposed change would allow buildings in excess of 5 stories or 50 feet in height to use 5% of the building or of building surface for identification signage on each wall and not count against their total allowance of sign area. Staff has conducted research to find out what other communities are allowing with regard to signs in the right-of-way. And the results are as follows. And you guys have that handout. Do we want to go through all the research? Do you guys want me to read out what the findings were? Okay. So as far as the communities that do not allow anything in the public right-of-ways, are Sioux Falls, Aberdeen, Huron, Harrisburg, Deadwood, Fort Pierre, Rapid City, Yankton, Brookings, Brandon, and Mitchell. And the community that allows political but not real estate signs is Pierre. And the communities that allow real estate signs in the right-of-ways are Sturgis, Spearfish, and Box Elder. The recommendation is city staff doesn't support allowance of the realtor signs within the right-of-ways. City staff does support the revision to allow for some identification signage on large buildings within the community.
Thank you, Brandy. I'd like to open the public hearing if anybody's here to speak on behalf or against the resolution. Go ahead and approach and state your name for the record.
Shaggy. Adam Lala, City Council, Ward B. I actually proposed the changes to the sign ordinance. They did talk about what went down in the City Council meeting. The thing that was not discussed was the City Council work session where we discussed making changes to this to allow for real estate signs. In that meeting, there was no one that was against it. I can't say for sure everyone said yes, but no one was against the ordinance change to allow real estate. We did pass it, stating that we need to get a new sign ordinance in place. Let's get it in. Let's make changes as needed as we go. What we are looking to do, and what I have brought forward, is to allow real estate signs, and there's a couple of different reasons. There are portions of area in town, especially around the lake, that a real estate sign in private is not conducive for selling. There's areas, especially between the racetrack and the golf course, where they don't have a lot of green space. Now, you could put real estate signs on different stands, place them in the middle of their sidewalk, things of that nature, but where there's heavy trees, fences, bushes, things of that nature for their just typical landscaping, would make that sign very difficult. What you also run into is that signs on stands tend to tip over, tend to get ran over. If we get heavy snow and plows go by, they will get damaged and possibly just with the wind we have, they disappear. So what we are looking to do, it's not just real estate signs for sale. There's also areas where if you are trying to sell a house and they are running into, they want to do an open house and it's not directly on the corner, how do you get people to come look at your house? We are promoting, changes to that and hope that the people of Watertown understand this is what we're looking to do. There's never been a complaint in the past, and we are just kind of hoping that you guys will take that into effect and look at it and see if that is presentable. Questions? It's kind of different being on this side for once.
With all the objections that you had raised as far as the hardships, whatever it would cause to for the real estate signs, how do the other cities handle that don't allow real estate signs in the right of way?
And I haven't talked to the other cities. We simply have tried to come through with that. I know that did do a poll for that to see what they have it. I see real estate for Sioux Falls is not allowed. However, living in Sioux Falls before I moved back to Watertown, they're in the right of way. They may not allow them, but they're there. And honestly, ours have never been allowed, but they have never been enforced either. So this is really what it comes down to, is an enforcement. We are just trying to get people to see there are certain areas of towns, and you guys know it as well as I do, being on the other side of the sidewalk may not be a huge issue. If you're wide open, it's a possibility. But if we're trying to sell properties and on average they bring in good money when people buy homes, they buy other stuff to go with it. So we don't want to deter people from buying homes. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, Mark. I don't have a definitive answer as how they take care of it. And the real estate board that's been here, or that is here, could probably talk more about that. They did move their signs so that they are in compliance, so it is possible. But we're just trying to get it. If you're trying to sell your house, you want it to be seen, plain and simple.
Brandy, in your review of the communities that don't allow any signage whatsoever in the right-of-way, did they specify why they didn't allow or what the reasonings were?
Ken actually conducted that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I did that. And basically, and some of the other cities did admit they have enforcement issues too for what they did, but most of them just a flat no that nothing is allowed in the public right of way, except for, of course, our city signs, street signs, governmental signs, et cetera, et cetera.
And maybe I'm missing something. Is there a size limitation to the real estate sign that would be allowed in the right-of-way if this was to move forward?
There's nothing proposed.
The sizes are still mandated by the sign ordinance as we have it currently. So 6 square feet is, I believe, what they have currently as the sign ordinance size for real estate. So they would not be able to do anything larger than that anyway.
Would I be able to place a 6-foot square sign in the Clearview Triangle areas around? Is that stipulated elsewhere in the ordinance?
Yeah, that's in a separate section of the ordinance that nothing's allowed in the Clearview Triangle anyway. So, and I don't believe we're trying to amend that out.
No, and basically we just looked at everything that would stay the same. The current signs, which are, I believe, 2 by 3?
6 square.
Yeah, roughly 6 square feet. They have not changed on size at all.
Has-
Clearview is not going to be allowed.
Has staff or the city received any documented complaints in the last 5 years with the location of real estate signs in the right-of-way?
We have received a lot of complaints about signs in the right of way, but whether they're just real estate in nature, no. It's an aggregate of all the signs. They didn't specify this one because before there were so many different ones that were allowed. So I couldn't specify and say that, no.
Last question. If we allow real estate signs to be located in the public right-of-way, what preempts us from allowing other types of signs in the right-of-way?
What's what we'll have by ordinance, but again, it's going to facilitate enforcement to be a little tougher, because if you can do it, then I'm going to do it, and blah blah blah. It just becomes on our end, but that's only our
To me,
problem.
that's the biggest issue. If we're going to regulate signage based upon what the sign is saying, as opposed to the time, place, and manner of which the sign is being located, that to me is problematic.
Todd, from the staff point of view, one of the reasons we don't support it is public right-of-way is dedicated for public purposes, and what that means to me is it's intended to accommodate utilities. It's meant to accommodate the sidewalk. It's meant to accommodate street directional signage and those kind of conveyances. When you then add other signage to that, you might add to confusion or, as you stated in the Clearview site, other attributes to the travel that shouldn't be there. And so from a right-of-way management standpoint, the cleaner we keep the right-of-way from, I'll call it private uses, the better. I mean, because we're talking about realtor signs specifically, but you kind of alluded to it too, that we're worried about creep. We're going to end up with a free-for-all on yard sale signs, which we already do have issues with. And I mean, it just doesn't stop with realtor signs. It does end up extending to all manners and different variations of signage. And one way to do that is to keep the right-of-ways clear, period. And I don't disagree that there are places where this ordinance would be a challenge, but I would also make a statement that those windows or areas are so minor in the overall scope of how many miles of right-of-way there are in the community that we could make special exceptions in some spots if and when warranted, but to carte blanche open it up all over the community is probably not the best approach either.
I think that the concern about right-of-way creep, as far as other types of signs, you talk about rummage sale signs and so on and so forth. I think there's a distinct difference between promoting commerce and the opportunity for homeowners and home buyers, homeowners and home sellers, the best opportunity to recognize homes for sale without having to get creative with the for sale signs, as opposed to putting them out on the right of way, which we've been doing for years without particular incident. And I think that there is a distinct difference if you identify with this ordinance that it's limited to real estate signs. I think it's easy to differentiate between real estate signs and all other types of signs that might be in the right of way.
So one of the things is the safety aspect too of keeping that area clear and open for field of view. And Shane or Kenny, maybe you can address this. Our clear view triangle actually stems not from the curb and gutter, but from the edge of the right-of-way from the person's private property, correct?
Correct. So it's a further setback from. It doesn't include the right-of-way. It's on private property. What did we end up with? The 20 foot clear right view triangle.
And so realistically, it's even more than that if you were to include that right-of-way space, right? Because the hypotenuse of the triangle would essentially continue onto the street.
Right. So it becomes between a 30 and 35 foot view, and at 35 miles an hour or 30 miles an hour, you have to have that ability to recognize and stop in that short distance if there is a conflict that's coming out that the sign may block that view. So that's one of those things that we're concerned about. And in general, real estate signs aren't that tall, but they add to site issues.
Thank you.
There are no the 2 foot by 3 foot sign, but there are no restrictions on height of the sign. I could put it on a 4 foot stand. As written, as presently written.
I think it just says six square feet.
Yeah, so I mean, if
And
I
it's
want to
just
put,
typically it's 2 by 3. So
if I want to be innovative and put it on an 8-foot pole, I could do that in my front yard.
without doing a little further research, Todd, typically I suppose you could do a 1 by 6 or 6 by 12 or.
I'm just looking at the ways things could be weaseled around.
Yep.
Is there anybody else that wishes to speak?
Other questions for me? No.
Thank you, Adam.
I'm Dave Fuchs, the Association Executive for the Northeast South Dakota Association of Realtors. The 134 members of the Northeast South Dakota Association of Realtors would like to encourage your approval of the amendment to the signage ordinance to allow real estate signs within the right-of-way within the city of Watertown. Visible signage is an extremely important aspect of real estate marketing to both buyers and sellers. Prohibiting real estate signs in the right-of-way present a number of inherent problems to the $90 million real estate industry in Watertown. First, to require these signs to be outside of the right-of-way will require them to be set back 20 feet from the street for many homes in Watertown, making them difficult to see from the street. This difficulty is not just a factor of the distance from the street, but also the visibility of information on the sign that the signage ordinance limits to 6 square feet. If we are required to place signs that far back, then many of the current signs will be virtually illegible from the street. Additionally, each property will need to have its exact right-of-way position researched and determined, as there is not a consistent standard throughout Watertown, with some setbacks as much as 65 feet. Setting a sign 20 feet from the street will, in some cases, be completely invisible due to fencing or landscaping, including bushes and trees. Those homeowners will lose the benefit of any real estate sign advertising their home for sale. Second of all, signage promoting an open house would also deal with the same difficult visibility to be in compliance. Open house signage is not limited to just one sign per frontage like for sale signs. Additional open house signage would need to go on private property, get owner permission, and research and locate the right-of-way location for each additional sign. All of this for a 1-hour open house that the seller considers an important part of finding a buyer for their home. Having your approval of this amendment would allow those signs to simply be put in the public right-of-way. Third, we have the lake property. And lake property presents a different set of challenges if signs are prohibited from the right-of-way. With the number of properties at the lake, many with much narrower lots than we experience in town, setting signage 20 feet or more back from the road will deal with obstructions of visibility from the many outbuildings that are built closer to the road. And some of these homes have literally no visibility of signage from the road, as their garages use the entire allowed frontage of the property. Additionally, the beautiful landscaping at the lake, intending to provide privacy and enhance the natural beauty of Lake Campesca, prohibit any type of signage unless you want a sign 10 feet in the air stretching over the bushes, which would be an expensive proposition to the homeowner and not really in the standard that we expect. Finally, what is the real impact on our community by having real estate signs in the right-of-way? Currently, there are only 161 residential properties for sale in Watertown. That's a relatively small number compared to the total number of residential properties in town. Buyers consider that signage an important tool to see what homes are for sale. Sellers consider them critical to getting a buyer. In fact, since the implementation of the ordinance, many homeowners have moved their sign back into the right-of-way after their realtor moved it to be in compliance with the ordinance. The residents of Watertown do not have a problem with where real estate signs have been in the past. At the City Council work session to discuss this ordinance, when asked if any constituent had ever contacted a council member about real estate signs in the right-of-way, not a single council member had received a call. It is just not an issue. But when it is your home for sale, being prohibited from placing a real estate sign in the right-of-way will be an issue. For the $90 million real estate industry in Watertown and the homeowners, realtors, and many service industries that make their living supporting those sales, we encourage you to support the proposed exemption for real estate signs. Any questions?
I do have a question. You'd mentioned property boundaries a couple times as you were talking, and from my experience when I bought my own home, part of the purchasing property process is to go through a boundary survey.
I didn't mention boundaries. I mentioned the distance of right-of-way, public right-of-way.
But the boundaries of your property would determine where the public right-of-way starts.
The survey map would indicate that, yes. But if you notice, the surveys are done clear up to the street and staked at the street. So most of the homeowners consider their property all the way to the street.
Dave, have you contacted anybody in any of these other communities that do not regulate or do not allow for real estate signs? Have they said that drastically impacts their ability to sell property in Sioux Falls?
Hearing that information tonight was the first time I had heard of that, Todd.
So you would agree with the statement that people are selling property in these other communities?
There's no question, and I would contend that regardless of the location, properties are still going to be sold.
Any studies done now with online? I mean, how effective placing a sign in the yard versus an electronic listing?
There really hasn't, not that I'm aware of, relative to signage. There's been a lot of information come out of other types of advertising and the impact of online access, but not in relation to signage.
Is your primary concern the real estate community's primary concern the lake? I mean, that's come up a few different times. And I don't even know if this is doable, but if it could be limited to the lake, as far as if that's the main area of concern for the right of way, is that what I'm hearing?
The lake presents some unique challenges, but we also have some areas in town where there is no sidewalk, there's no clear right-of-way. The lake is unique in the challenges it presents and the closeness of them, the allowance of the garages, the many garages that are at the roadside of it. There just is limited access there. We would like to maintain the status quo of what has been enforced in the past, which is allowing the real estate signs within the right-of-way.
Ken, if we were to look at a specific property in town, and I know we've pulled it up on GIS previously, where we can see, the approximate right-of-way in that area, how difficult would it be to come up with a measure off of the edge of the curb to the approximate edge of their property?
Most of our right-of-ways in town are generally 66 feet. We generally got a 40 or 42-foot road. So you're basically talking about 13 feet behind the curb. So if you want to make it simplified and say, okay, any sign that can't disseminate a property line with ease, go 10, 13 feet behind the curb and call it good.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board?
Are we dealing with these as two separate motions, or just a single motion as presented? 218026, 218028.
I believe we'll need to make a motion to adopt and then a motion to amend.
No, are we handling them together, or are we handling them as separate items? The following.
I prefer if you took them through as two separate items myself.
So the amendment of real estate is going to be separate than the excess of 5 stories?
No, they're together. there's only one amendment to the ordinance. Unless you provide guidance on changing language and wish to amend, your motion would be unanimous. You're either going to change the language or leave the language and approve it all.
Can we deal with them separately?
Yes, you can, but it'll take a while to prepare a resolution, a separate resolution.
So we have to take both these all or nothing?
No, we can take them separate. We would need to break to prepare 17-38 as a resolution for the second portion. I'm a really quick typist, but I wouldn't want to put a time limit on it.
But in the resolution, couldn't they say we support this part and not this part?
Yeah, they could say that, but
But then as it goes to city council, that's what they're going to be ruling on anyway.
they can say whatever they want, but the vote on the resolution is
I see.
one or the other.
But they could amend the resolution
Yes.
to, if they weren't in favor of one of the portions of it, then they could,
They could amend to strike out a portion,
okay.
yes. Or change wording, yes.
Are we okay to close the public hearing? Okay. Look for a motion from the board.
And then also, Blake, this is where there was an additional footnote added to the resolution, so we'll make two motions, and then we'll vote on both of those motions after they're made.
When you say additional footnote, a rewording of the second portion. It was just a revision of what came in the public notice, and so what you would do is make a motion on the resolution, and then if you are in favor of moving forward with it, you make a motion to amend to conform to the changes that were presented, which is just changing that language on that second portion.
And this here, I have it highlighted that we added the language of also within the table, just for clarification on where that language was being added.
Blake, are we going to have a public hearing or discussion on then the 8028 before we ask for the motion?
That's right now. That was part of we've already had that public hearing, correct?
Correct. So the public hearing included comments on either issue, and hearing no comments against the building identification signage. I presume that there's no opposition or issues with regard to that matter.
And so the staff's position is not in favor of exempting the real estate signs, but in favor of the buildings in excess of 5 stories, 50 feet in height may use 5% of the identification signage.
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion based upon staff input and recommendations and problematic issues associated with the real estate signs not being defined as far as maximum height. I make the motion to approve Resolution 2017-37 as presented tonight, however, striking number 5 under 218026.
Second.
So just to clarify for the record, you would be striking that first paragraph that starts with the following shall be added to section 21-8026-5, period, exempt real estate sign as defined under 21.8014.10.A.1.
Yes. Yes. Yes, and then adding the also within the table, add J to table 2 as footnote to maximum total sign area GH. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. So we have a motion by Todd and a second by Liam.
Okay, so if if a council member is in favor of item number 5, then you have to vote no on this motion. Am I understanding that correctly?
Correct.
Yes.
And then, yes. Or you can offer a substitute motion to amend, to approve as presented under Roberts.
I would like to approve as amended.
Okay, so you'd make a motion
To
to
approve.
Todd's to reinsert that omitted portion.
Correct.
We have a motion by Stein. Do we have a second? No second?
Ask 3 times.
Will anybody second the motion by Mr. Stein? No second? Okay. So we have on the table a motion by Mr. Kays and a second by Culhane to pass the resolution minus bullet point 5 from section 21.8026. Is there any further discussion by the board?
Let me just talk about why I'm making it. I understand that it's basically been an enforcement issue for many, many years. I see this bigger than real estate signs. I think in my readings and what's been happening in some case law across the nation, I think when we're starting to talk about regulating speech, which is what we're doing by saying real estate signs are okay, but Todd's home occupation sign's not okay in the public right of way, I think it's problematic moving forward. And so that's the only reason. It has nothing to do with the quality individuals that sell real estate in this town or their abilities to sign, to be able to sell properties. I think if we look at the 11 other communities that don't allow signs in their communities, whether they're enforcing their rules or not, there must be a reason for that. And therefore my reasons for the motion.
Thank you, Todd. I'm in agreement with you, and I guess I'd just say that, I understand that there's some challenges in specific areas. My problem is that this is kind of a carte blanche statement here, and if we were to address those on a more specific basis, I think we could maybe look at it a little bit differently. Any other comments from the board? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes. Opposed?
No.
Brandy, can we get a roll call?
Also, don't we still need another motion before we vote, Vince?
No, Todd fixed it with his
Okay.
his motion.
Okay, roll call. Stein.
No.
Hanson.
Yes.
Dolly.
Yes.
Culhane.
Yes.
Case.
Aye.
All right. Motion passes.
Just for to complete the conversation, this will appear on the November 20 council agenda for consideration by the council to further ratify your decision or discuss and vote for or against the resolution that comes out of this committee. So just wanted clarification that there's one more step and when it's occurring.
Thank you, Shane. Moving on to item 3 on the agenda is the rezone of a portion of Interstate Office Edition.
All right, give me 1 second. Okay, so the petitioner, Watertown Development Company and Redland Art Center are the owners of the real property shown in this exhibit up on the overhead. The petitioner submitted application and petition on November 1st, 2017, requesting approval for rezoning the current described property from BP Business Park District to I-1 Light Industrial District to improve the marketability of the lots included. Some facts, the adjacent zoning designations, there is I-1 to the west, which is what they are proposing to become. BP Business Park District is to the north and the east, which is what it is existing, and then the land south of the property is not annexed or zoned. And the adjacent public right-of-ways will be included in the rezone. The minimum lot area for the I-1 districts is 30,000 square feet, and for the BP, not the I-2 districts like it says, is 3 acres. And there's approximately 61 acres included or involved in the rezone. So staff recommendation is that the Plan Commission approve the application to rezone the described property.
Thank you, Brandy. I'd like to open the public hearing if anybody's here to speak on behalf or against. Any questions from the board?
The property that was zoned BP previously had covenants on that property. Those covenants have been taken care of, which would allow for other uses to go on this property.
Michelle Kakachik from the Watertown Development Company. Those covenants will remain in place, and any variances required from those covenants for any future projects are at the discretion of the Mallard Point Joint Venture Committee.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Got a motion by Kays and a second by Culhane. Is there any additional discussion?
My motion is made based upon the proximity to the other I-1 zoning in the area.
Thank you, Ted. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Fourth item on the agenda is new business.
None.
Any old business?
And none.
Any addition?
Wait, just a second. Pat, do you have old business, or you?
Well, I certainly do, but I'm waiting to hear from people that I have
Okay.
heard back. So
Okay.
you might want to.
Maybe we should update you. We have had some discussions again. So why don't we do this? Let's discuss that as old business on a future agenda. But I think we need to update you and give you direction. And I think we're ready to do that. Unless you want the update through this committee and at this time.
We don't need to do a background. This was back to April and May. Pat Mahold, Watertown, real estate broker and lot owner. Back in April or May, I applied for R1 garage and sent out the notices and did everything that was right, and came back and we applied for building permits. My 2 buyers of the lots came up and talked to the building, wanted to find out what we had to do to get things done. And actually, we haven't done a damn thing. I was told that on the north side, I don't know if you have it up, put it up on the north side. On the north side of North Lake Drive, there is a development called North Lake Drive Addition. And it has across the back side of that a road which is called Pheasant Lane. Now, this has been going on for almost 40 years, folks. And this Pheasant Lane is just a path. On the north side is the county, and on the south side is the city. I was told that in order to get to my property, I would have to curb, gutter, and blacktop the road. I would have to do that. Really? So I got 150, another 20 to the road. It's 170 plus 200 feet that I would have to put curb and gutter. But there's a problem. One part of the property is on the county. So maybe what we would do is just make you curb and gutter your side. Well, really. Curb and gutter a half of a road. For property that's sat there for 40 years and hasn't done anything. Well, no, that doesn't seem realistic, you know? Maybe we should do something different. This, I would say, if I hear things right, there's been more discussion on this property than there was on the development on the hill. Honest to God, it's been worked, reworked, and all for the sake of wanting to have access to my property. Down the line from me, there's 8-10 properties that have access to the old 139, which is now North Lake Drive. The state didn't allow because state highway. It was turned over to the city of Watertown. Building permits evidently have been issued, but none of this access problem. Now we want an access problem, and honest to God, you know, we want some changes, but you know, it's just like when I asked for RG, the requirement to build, you could build the garage on 212, 81, and Highway 20 with the requirements that they've got for garage sites. It can only be so high, can have steel roof, no steel siding. Gosh, there's just a new building downtown on Broadway that's got steel siding on the side. Go up and down the alleys, go on Maple Street, all those people have got beautiful steel siding, but you can't put that on a garage. Something's wrong. And every 20 feet of building, you have to make a cubicle or something out 2 feet by 6 feet or 8 feet, and then go back and then extend again. I tell you, for the simplicity of selling a stupid lot that I've owned for 40 years or close to that, I'm nowhere. And we're going to think about it. We'll talk about it. The last thing I heard was, well, maybe it would be a good idea if the city just put a approach to the whatever lane that is, Grouse Lane, and get you inside. But there'd be a problem now. Now the problem would be you'd have to run culverts. What? Now you're going to have to consider culverts too. This is my dilemma. I had 2 people that wanted to buy a lot, and if I had sold them the lots, which I should have done, and I had no further obligation. But as a licensed real estate person and somebody wanting to be fair to buyers, I wanted to do things right, to make things right. And I've got slapped in the face, spit upon, and honest to God, I don't know where we're heading for in this ordinance change. Honestly, I'm buffaloed here in the middle of November, and I still got no answer. Nobody will answer me. I go up there, I've been up there 4 times since the last week. They're all in meetings. I can't get an answer.
Shane, I believe you said you had an update for Pat?
Yep. All right. Thank you, Pat, for your summary. I believe there's a couple things that maybe got left out, and I'll fill in a couple holes. And Ken can correct me if I'm wrong. The challenge is number one, you could sell those properties to anyone you want to at any time. And that's, I'm not saying that to be,
Yeah, no.
I'm saying that to be factual, not facetious. You know, I have no ill will here at all. I'm just trying to be factual. So you could have sold those at any time. However, the strings that are attached to the building permits is that they have an improved right-of-way access. Is that correct, Ken?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so the challenge is,
We're right-
this has sat still, idle, since the 80s, when this was platted and annexed. So the issue lies with the lack of follow-through on details related to the plats that were approved in the 80s. No public improvements were completed with Pheasant Lane or any of its tributary roadways onto Lake Drive. What my staff has been working with and trying to get answers from Mr. Mahold, and we haven't, there hasn't been a week go by that we haven't at least talked about this, and Ken can attest to this, that we continually try to find a way. And I think what we've determined is that we would like to present to the Planning Commission and ultimately the council maybe a proposal to do a minimum level roadway in Pheasant Lane, and then also acquire waivers of right to protest the future improvements. So in other words, we're discussing the not needing asphalt, not needing curb and gutter, and those kind of things at this time. What we would ask for is that the proper grading and base work and things be done to accommodate a gravel road. And also then we would handle some drainage concerns by having, shallow ditches alongside the roadway as well. Now, granted, that's easy to say because we haven't done one lick of surveying to depict what that terrain and those drainage issues would be. So it's easy to say, not necessarily easy to implement. What you see on the screen, we just did this the other day, is everything you see highlighted in magenta is property that's owned by somebody other than, it was the prior owner was Mary Gephardt. Now it's under Doc Howard's manages that property now. And we did have a meeting with Doc Howard, and I'm not going to put any words in Doc's mouth or anything from that, but it was a fairly decent conversation. And what I gather out of it is that because all of these highlighted properties are in the city limits, and if we focus on just the city limits portion of this properties that are involved, those people that are highlighted can come forward to the city with a petition to do those improvements. Now, I'm proposing.
Would you say that again?
They could come to the city petitioning for a roadway to be built there. That's their right in the city and in our process.
But if we don't have 50% plus one.
No, right, but we wouldn't necessarily have to improve the entirety of Pheasant Lane. There are, and I don't remember exactly where some of the properties that are involved here, but say you came in Grouse or whatever this one is here and exited over here, or came in from this direction and exited over here. We could do improvements in areas that are more than 50%. And Mr. Howard didn't even say that he wouldn't be. He's got other issues that are going on out there. People drive back there that presumably without permission, or that, different things, activities. So he didn't even say that he was completely opposed about the improvements. What he was opposed to is that he doesn't believe in his lifetime that he or his family are going to sell any of those properties to someone else. So then, which means that they don't technically need the improvements. But he didn't say that he wouldn't support the need for some improvements. But now that
we'd have to build. We'd have to.
Right. So we would build a road.
closer on our side, so it's not touching his property? Or how
Right.
does that 50% rule work?
Well, no. Okay, so we could, if we did it by waiver of right to protest, then as each building gets a building permit or subsequent improvements, that invokes the assessment. Okay? So, I mean, we've done that in the past. Now, we'd have to vet this through and make sure that that's the right way to do it. But that's the idea, is that, say, for instance, from this driveway entrance here to this driveway entrance, all of those are owned by, all but one are owned by others other than Mr. Howard. And he wouldn't be able to protest that improvement. Now, what we also would do is find a way to write an agreement that says whenever this property over here connects to whatever public improvement is done, they have to pay a pro rata fee back to the community to recover those costs. And we've done that.
Even if it's located in the county?
Yeah, we just did that, in fact. I mean, 2nd Street Northwest was done by public funds and had a large stretch of county, and as that land developed next to it, we had them pay for the pro rata share. So there is a way that we've done this, and I think that that's what I would propose here. The challenges are a few yet, but I would say that the city has to consider and adopt a minimum maintenance road for Pheasant Lane and identify the waiver right to protest, how we want to handle that aspect of the project. That's my update, and I was hoping to do this to Mr. Mahold personally, not in the public forum, and then bring it through the public forum. But that's, Pat, that's where I'm at, and I apologize if we've been really busy and in meetings, and I mean, you know, those meetings are all scheduled, and you're always welcome to schedule an appointment for a time and place to discuss things at my office. So,
Quick question. If we were to go forward with this process where we have a approved platted road right away that hasn't been constructed, and we run into other areas of the community, are we going to create more of a policy to do this as opposed to just a one-off?
well, we do things differently than in the 80s. Now we do development agreements, and the development agreements push for the improvements to be done in a certain period of time by ordinance. That is 2 years, unless otherwise agreed upon by the council to do a longer term. So in essence, all the projects going forward will not be done by the same process.
Would we restrict the types of usage on these lots dependent upon, you know, if we get that road built, is it going to matter whether I put a garage there or if I built a $250,000 house?
Okay, so the majority of the property is zoned residential, and when we would allow that residential use, and anything that's zoned RG would be allowable uses for what that entails. Now, what this temporary surfacing and minimum maintenance road does not intend to have, I'll call it the heavy utilities installed. We're not going to put water main in it. We're not going to put sewer main in it. We're not going to, so they'll get power, maybe telephone if they can convince the telephone companies to bring it down to them if they need it. Things like that. Maybe minimal services, but until there's enough density that would warrant the installation of water mains and sewer mains, it's not our intention to provide all public utilities to these lots.
Is there water and sewer in North Lake Drive that people could access if they wanted to build a house?
In some areas.
When would you expect to have the proposal back to us?
Well, okay, so there's two different tracks here. One, we would have to decide on minimum road standard here. And two, unless we get a petition from those folks that would want it, there's really not a method for us to bring it forward. We can't, as a city, we can bring these forward, but without the support from the adjacent property owners, it probably would fail.
Pat, have you talked to your neighbors of owners of property out there? Would they, if a road could be built that was assessed against their property, or a gravel road or something, do you think you could get a group of individuals to support that, your neighbors out there?
No, it's only, well, there's only 4 owners out there, and I would say no. The far west being the most vivid, or the vocal, I don't want to mention his name, but absolutely not, you know, and on the right side of the proposed road that would go in, years ago, I was the one that went and I saw this thing, and again, I did it as a real estate broker and asked the city to move that road. They had that access into that property down below the hill, and I said, it looks like we're going to have a tragedy. People coming out of that lane, and you got 40-mile-an-hour traffic. There's no place in Watertown that has 40-mile-an-hour speed limits except out there, with city property on both sides. And yet the property that I got is wide open. I mean, there's just nothing. So I guess I don't know the saleability of the lots. I don't know. I was just trying to be a good neighbor. These guys are trying to be good. Said, well, if you would do that, we would do this. But holy smokes! I mean, we've gone through a construction season over a simple thing like this that we can't get an answer to. It's inconceivable to me. I just don't understand. People down the road have got access in there, and I know there's been thievery out there. Hell, somebody stole my boat lift. A great big boat lift. I'd like to advertise in the paper, but I didn't want to pay for it. If you want the top, give me a call. But it's just little things like this that are frustration, and I probably should have just I can't do that. I wouldn't hang somebody with a lot and do that. I'm just glad I didn't do what I did, because I wouldn't want anybody to go through what I've gone through.
Pat, is there no access at all, or is it just unimproved access?
Unimproved access.
Correct me if I'm wrong. These are RGs? Your 2 lots are RGs?
Are what?
They're residential garage zoning?
Yeah.
And the purpose, the buyers ostensibly want to buy them to put a garage up, right?
Yeah. I got a neighbor that's a contractor who has a truck with a trailer.
Isn't this one of those instances where those individuals could come before the Board of Adjustments and request a variance to build it, or not? Or what's the?
Well, they were turned. They've gone for a building permit. What do I have to do to get a building permit?
Well, yeah, obviously they would apply for the building.
So you're asking me a question that I can't answer.
Well, but if the lots are completely unusable for the purpose to which they exist, that seems like they're candidates for variance. Maybe I'm wrong, but
well, this is the back to the catch-22 thing. Is if they don't have access, I can't grant a permit.
And if you don't grant them the permit, then they go in front of the BOA, right?
They go to the BOA, and if you guys can the Board of Adjustment could.
I mean, the standard for
but
variance.
Then the Board of Adjustment have to end up giving them access off of 139 or whatever the
North Lake Drive.
North Lake Drive now. So
that's the only access is North Lake Drive right now.
Right.
But there is. Would you show me Pat's property?
Because the standard for variance is that you can't use your property for the purpose it's intended, right? I mean, the conditions surrounding it are such that it disallows the very purpose for which it's intended.
That would be one of the hardships, but that's what this whole thing is all revolving around, is trying to get access to the people so that they can have it, but access that'll.
2 lots here.
Okay, and then is the lot to the northeast, is that a public right of way?
Yeah, we had that changed some years ago because it was down below.
Okay, so there is a public right of way there that a person could drive across those trees and access the lot.
I could access the one lot, yeah, not
Yeah.
the other.
Unless you granted an easement across the property for the guy to use it.
Well, the problem you have is you got 35 feet of trees.
Yeah.
And that
No.
doesn't leave, when you talk setbacks, you don't have any room, you know, really to do that. The buildings, I think, would probably want to be about at least 60 feet, you know?
Yeah.
And, this is, you know, I've got,
Well, I was just thinking if you put a 12-foot wide easement on the northwest side of that property, getting down to the neighbor to the south, somehow be able to should be able.
northwest, that would be up here.
Yeah, run that corner, a 12-foot strip all the way down to the other guy's place.
Okay.
You might have to take some trees out of the front. Somehow, I don't know what the policy is for the city to get access off that unimproved public right of way. Is that still? Can we get a and if Pat and those two lots would pay for a gravel road off of that access to get to his property, that would take care of Pat, wouldn't it? It doesn't take care of the big issue, but that's a
A- And we did have that discussion, but of course, technically, he could get a gravel road here and to here, and all issues are taken care of.
Show that again, Shane. Shane, do you want to show where that is again?
Yeah, so this is, I can't see the screen, so this is Grouse, and this is Pheasant Lane. So to be fully compliant for access, it would be here and to here. And that would be one way to do it without an easement. The big concessions that the city's had in our discussion so far is, right now, our minimum road is base, asphalt, curb and gutter, and if necessary, storm sewer. And we need to really digest if we're going to do this. Now, you say that that's no big deal, but I can count to you multiple streets in this town that were allowed to be gravel, and even though they pavement numbers or traffic numbers would show that they absolutely need to be paved, we have an impossible task to try to get them paved.
But in this situation,
That's why the waivers are an important part of this
yes,
process.
I'm saying if we were to build that, or even a partial gravel, or you build it less than your standard, and you don't, and you just said, okay, but here's the deal: 7 years, the road's going to be built, and those two properties are going to pay for it, or their pro rata portion. I mean, we could still lock it in today without having to build a 30-foot road out there. If we through a development lot agreement, couldn't we?
Well,
Waiver of right to protest.
we've been doing that with a waiver of right to protest,
Right,
but
right.
then you have to have an idea of how many lots improvements are going to trigger that improvement project. Is it one more? Is it 3 more? Is it 10 more? So there's lots of complicated conversations that we don't have easy answers for. You know, do we set just a time limit, like you said, 10 years, and then you build a road? What if there's only still the 2 in 10 years? Then they're paying an absorbent amount for a small road. So there are so many issues and facets here, and I get it. If I was Mr. Mahold, I would be pulling my hair out too, and I probably have already, over time. But, these aren't easy answers. And the easiest thing is that we can recognize that back in the 80s, when this was a concept and somebody thought that there's going to be no issue of this taking off and being done, that was short-sighted and it failed. So now we have to make sure that whatever we discuss here has a path to success. And believe me, we've talked about who's going to maintain the road, because it's a hazard for the street department to have to go in and manage this little bitty area for grading gravel. It's a hazard for the fire department. Are they going to be able to get their equipment in there and service that thing? Where's the nearest fire hydrant? All that stuff. if they generate garbage, how are we going to get the garbage truck back there? I mean, there are so many facets to this discussion that go beyond simplicity, that's why I don't know that Mr. Mahold understands that there are a lot of public things here that have to be ironed out because of the failure in the 80s.
Well, then, understanding this is a very complex issue, and we've been discussing it for 6 months, when would we presume to have some sort of policy to have before the board?
Well, I can't speak for the fire department and the garbage and all that, but here's what I'm thinking about, is if we do this as a minimum maintenance road, that we would put all those responsibilities on the private people. I don't think I can turn that on. You'll have to turn that on, Brandy. But we would have to make sure that whatever level of service we offer those folks is what we can provide. And you know, so having a travelable surface is important for the emergency people. Obviously, the people that would develop in those would need electricity. Whether they need gas for an alternate heating source, or if we allow propane tanks. Do we even allow propane tanks in the community?
I don't believe we have anything against it.
Okay, so
we don't.
So anyway, there's lots of things like that need to be discussed. Okay, and if we can get this discussion rolling and waive garbage collection and waive mail. I mean, you know, I don't know. They're gonna have addresses? Are they gonna collect mail there?
Has there been anybody other than Mr. Mahold that owns property in this area that has brought development issues to you guys in the last year?
Been some lots sold beyond that.
It would, I think a couple of the people that Mr. Mahold have been working with, they've came in and talked and asked about access as well. And then otherwise, just the property to the west there, the southwest, he has concerns about the right-of-way going through his property and then potentially wanting to move that.
Mm-hmm. Is that Mr. Hested?
Yeah.
Well, maybe what needs to be done is maybe there should be a meeting of the property owners to find out what the intent of all of the property owners want to do out there. Maybe they don't. Maybe they're not even aware of the issues that Mr. Mahold has gone through, and it's not an issue right now. But next year, maybe you get 6 people that want to do the same thing as Mr. Mahold, and now we've got something boiling to the head. And maybe trying to set up a goal to meet with all of the landowners out there as a staff and explain the issues to them so they understand what's going on. And then maybe, hopefully, sometime after the first of the year, we have some sort of policy, because we know that's going to take us 2 or 3 months to get something through the council and everything, so that maybe by spring we've got something ready that we can at least have a milestone to look at.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to see something so that those properties.
Yeah, no, don't get me wrong. I have major heartburn over. I have a huge philosophy problem here. People own property, and if they can't get a building permit because there isn't public access, we have to find a way to figure that out. Because otherwise, if nobody can get a building permit and they all own property, to me, that's an issue.
Why am I paying taxes?
Exactly. So I think, and nobody that's around today was involved with what happened in the 80s, and now we're still trying to resolve a problem that started in the 80s. And there's no simple answer, but
I know
we'll get there.
I'm not knocking you guys.
No,
I know you've been working on this really, really hard, and I know that's what's going on. And it'd just be nice if we could maybe somehow figure out, let's just say, by this date we'll have an idea, so the landowners have an idea of what can happen.
I would agree with that. The RG thing, particularly in this location, has come up before the board a number of times over the past year or 2 or 3 since I've been here. Mm-hmm. And what I think we owe Mr. Mahold is just a commitment that we're going to stay on it and stay the course and come up with something. It may not necessarily be to your liking, but at least have some resolution in some fashion.
Well, it is to my liking because there'll never be another house, I don't think, built on that property because everybody that's bought those has bought it for garages. They didn't know they couldn't because it was R1 before. So most of the people aren't even aware of R1G, that own those lots. There's a guy from Mitchell that owns 3 of them. There's a guy that just built a house, just bought a house out there. He bought 2, and then all the way through, it's just been that. I know people have talked, as neighbors we talk, we want to build buildings, and it's just not going to work because your houses would have to face Pheasant Lane, who have no sewer, water, and garbage.
Well, and that's part of the challenge is that we have to accommodate the RG and the R1s, and there just was never a full plan implemented here.
Maybe the recommendation, if you're looking for another policy consideration, could be is that you rezone everything to RG and it's just garages out there, and that makes us a better pill to swallow from a fire department standpoint, and from other things that we can say, okay, if we're going to build a road and our policy is going to take care of these sins of our fathers, by not doing it right, we can build this minimum maintenance road, but it's only going to be garages that are serving it. Maybe that's something we can live with if Doc Howard has no intention in the next 25 years of ever developing.
Right. I was just going to say, though, we have to be cautious, though, because if somebody buys the land from the Howard family and wants to put the next row of houses out there, I mean, the area, and I can't remember the subdivision, but the one up north of City Park, this could be that next area.
But at that time, we'd have to address the infrastructure issues that are lacking, right?
Right.
We also amended the RG district to allow for sanitary sewer and water. So.
Well, maybe maybe you have a separate RGL for RG Lake, and it's not there. We could have more than one RG district.
True. We'll continue these conversations. And I think the first part is the city has to decide real quickly if we would accept I'll call it temporary gravel minimum service road, and then attach all the strings to whatever that means.
Thank you, Shane. Thank you, Pat. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, staff. It's a tough one.
Yeah,
Pat,
for sure.
Please, if you want to just continue this discussion in our office, just set up a schedule. We'll sit down and visit with you.
Well, I can understand where it's going, and I just being realistic.
No. If I was you, I'd be mad.
Being realistic, those are never going to be residential. Those 2 that were put in down there on Antelope Lane, that's understood. But when they came to me and wanted to put sewer down my driveway, so sewer, you get to my driveway, 616, and they come down to the house, and then over, so anybody to the east for probably 500-600 feet aren't going to be able to get on the sewer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So mine theoretically has sewer, because it's right opposite my property. Again, I'm not looking for the short term. I'm looking for the long term.
Right.
Because I think the realistic thing, I'd much rather see a dozen nice buildings, garages out there, rather than all the crap you see out there.
Yeah.
Yep.
We'll reach out to you and have more.
You.
Yep.
No reason for executive session, I assume?
Nope.
Need a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Stag?
Second.
It was a tie, I think. Yeah. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't want to send him away